In June 1982, the wind whipped across the rocky slopes above Port Stanley, cutting through wool and leather like a razor. Sergeant Callum Fraser pressed himself against the jagged outcrop, his breath steaming in the near-freezing air. In his hands was a rifle older than most of the men in his unit. Wooden stock worn smooth by decades, steel receiver glinting dully under the weak sun, a bolt-action mechanism crafted when Britain's empire still stretched across continents. The L-42A1 had been called obsolete, dismissed by allies and military analysts alike, but in Fraser's grip, it felt like an extension of his own body, an old friend whose quirks he knew intimately. Below, the Argentine positions on Mount Longdon bristled with modern rifles, automatic weapons, and a smattering of night optics. Fraser studied the lines of trenches, the glint of metal in the sun, calculating every shadow, every potential shot. His heart thudded in rhythm with the wind gusts, each beat reminding him that he had only one real advantage: patience, precision, and understanding the rifle as much as he understood himself. Hours stretched, the frosty terrain gnawed at his boots, and the tension in his shoulders never eased. Yet he did not rush. A young private whispered from behind, shivering, "Sergeant, won't they laugh at us? That rifle." Fraser gave him a sharp look, eyes scanning the enemy positions. "Let them laugh," he said, voice low but steady. "This isn't about looks or age. It's about discipline, focus, and knowing exactly what you can make it do. One shot, one kill." The private swallowed, unsure if he believed him, but Fraser's confidence radiated like a warm ember in the cold. Then, in a flicker of motion, a shadow shifted among the Argentine foxholes. Fraser eased the bolt back, felt the familiar resistance, and settled the crosshairs on a soldier, exposing himself just enough. Time slowed. The rifle, relic of a century past, hummed with potential. The young private exhaled without realizing it. And with a single, deliberate pull of the trigger, the world contracted to the moment of impact, a metal heartbeat echoing across the hills. For the first time that day, Fraser allowed himself a fraction of a smile. The rifle was more than a weapon. It was proof that experience, patience, and understanding could make even the oldest tools deadly. In the cold, jagged heights above Port Stanley, the age of steel and wood had found its voice again. The War Office had drawn lines on maps, signed papers, and declared the world a place of standards and protocols. Yet the men on the ground carried the inconvenient truth. NATO had settled on the 7.62 by 51 mm cartridge years ago, a uniform round that promised logistical simplicity across armies from Washington to Bonn. Yet in the hands of British snipers, the old .303 still whispered through the chambers of rifles. It was a relic, stubbornly resisting obsolescence, and behind it lay a tangle of supply chains that groaned under the weight of tradition. Ammunition officers shuffled pallets and manifests, trying to keep separate chains alive for a handful of specialists, while the brass debated shiny new rifles that would have cost millions. Money the Ministry of Defense was unwilling to spend. And so pragmatism took the upper hand. The existing Lee Enfield rifles, veterans of decades of war, were sent to the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield. There, engineers hammered new life into them, giving them hammer-forged barrels, floating stocks, and rifling optimized for the new NATO round. Each conversion was more than a mechanical exercise. It was human ingenuity wrestling with bureaucracy, old hands bending steel and wood into something that could survive modern warfare. Soldiers trained with these reborn rifles soon discovered their subtle power. They were accurate, reliable, and deceptively modern in their performance, yet cheap enough to satisfy the accountants. The battlefield, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony. Sometimes it favored the clever and thrifty, not the modern and expensive. And in those quiet moments before the fight, when cartridges clicked into place and eyes scanned the horizon, the L-42A1 proved that necessity, ingenuity, and a refusal to be discarded could turn even a century-old rifle into the most lethal tool on the field. The hillside was quiet except for the occasional snap of frost underfoot and the distant whistle of wind through the rocks. Sergeant Fraser adjusted his grip on the L-42A1, feeling the bolt's smooth, deliberate resistance beneath his fingers. This was no semi-automatic, no rapid-fire marvel designed to pepper the battlefield with bullets. It was a bolt-action rifle, a machine of patience and precision, and it demanded respect. British sniper doctrine had always been ruthless in its simplicity. First-round hits determined success, and anything after was a distraction. Each deliberate cycle of the bolt was not a limitation. It was a lesson, a pause carved into the chaos of combat, a chance to breathe, observe, and confirm the kill before revealing one's own position. The cock-on closing mechanism meant that as Fraser worked the bolt, all force went to extracting the spent cartridge, not disturbing the aim, allowing his eyes to remain locked on the target. Across the Atlantic, the Americans had embraced rapid follow-up shots with the M21, believing volume of fire would dominate the field, while the Soviets issued Dragunovs at squad level to extend suppression range rather than guarantee precision. Fraser knew that neither philosophy suited his mission. He needed one shot, one certainty, one outcome. Each deliberate squeeze of the trigger encoded discipline into his very motions. The enemy could fire faster, but the Brit needed only one bullet. And in that cold, wind-swept expanse, with frost biting at his cheeks and every heartbeat counting, Fraser felt the profound advantage of patience over speed, the quiet terror of a rifleman who had mastered both weapon and doctrine. The fog lay thick over the jagged cliffs of South Georgia, wrapping the landscape in a damp silence that pressed against the lungs. Color Sergeant Peter Leach moved with the careful precision of a predator. Each step measured, boots crunching softly over frost-crusted rocks. In his hands, the L-42A1 rifle, a weapon older than most of the soldiers around him, felt less like a tool and more like an extension of himself. Its wood was worn, its steel cold and familiar, a lineage of craftsmanship reaching back nearly a century. The ARA Garrico, a modern Argentine corvette, prowled below, its crew confident that no single rifleman could threaten them from this distance. Confidence, Leach knew, was a fragile shield. He reached the second floor of Shackleton House, his body pressed low against the wall. With a sharp motion, he swung the rifle but into the corner window, smashing the glass just enough to create a firing position. From this precarious perch, he leveled the scope at the ship's bridge. Every gust of wind was a calculation, every puff of fog a challenge to visibility. Leach's pulse slowed, his mind narrowing until only the target existed. One shot, one chance. The old bolt-action rifle demanded patience, but in the hands of a man who understood its rhythm, it became an instrument of silent, lethal authority. The Garrico's crew ducked instinctively as bullets found their mark, forcing the vessel into evasive maneuvers. A single rifleman, armed with a relic of the Victorian era, was holding a warship at bay. Weeks later, at Goose Green, the L-42A1 would face a different test. Rolling hills stretched endlessly beneath bitter winds that cut across open ground, carrying drizzle and the occasional stinging sleet. Visibility was a cruel mistress. Moments of clarity punctuated by patches of near-zero sight. Snipers from the 2nd Battalion Parachute Regiment worked in pairs, one spotting, one shooting, moving from patch of scrub to patch of rock. They relied not on optics alone but on intuition, years of training distilled into each decision. The rifle's modest 3.5 times scope limited what they could see at extreme ranges, forcing spotters to identify targets and calculate windage for every deliberate shot. Yet, in these harsh conditions, the weapon's simplicity proved a strength. Fewer moving parts meant fewer points of failure. The bolt-action mechanism never jammed, and the wooden stock, lightly insulated by the cold, remained reliable where synthetic alternatives might crack or warp. Every round fired was a statement of mastery. Every impact confirmed the subtle dance between human skill and mechanical precision. The rifle did not need to impress with firepower or rate of fire. It demanded understanding, patience, and unwavering focus. And in the chaos of the Falklands, where wind, fog, and cold conspired against man and machine alike, the L-42A1 excelled not because it was new, but because it was known intimately. History watched quietly from the shadows, its lesson clear. Old steel, guided by experience and determination, could outlast the most modern tools. and on those fogged, windswept cliffs it did. The night had fallen like a shroud over Mount Longdon, turning jagged rocks and hidden crevices into a labyrinth of shadows. Sergeant Fraser crouched behind a boulder, the L-42A1 resting against his shoulder, its familiar weight both comforting and demanding. In the days before the assault, snipers had stalked the slopes from concealed positions, taking deliberate shots at Argentine sentries, calculating every wind gust, every flicker of movement, each round a study in patience and precision. The rifle thrived in these conditions, its bolt-action rhythm, the subtle hum of the trigger, and the cold steel of its barrel had been perfected for this sort of methodical killing. But tonight was different. The attack had begun, and chaos had replaced calculation. Explosions shook the rocky slopes, illuminating the battlefield in brief, violent flashes. Shouts and gunfire echoed through the crevices, confusing senses sharpened by days of reconnaissance. Fraser adjusted the scope, but the 3.5 times magnification offered only glimpses of enemies appearing unpredictably from behind rocks, rising and falling like phantoms in the dark. The rifle's once dependable weight, which had provided stability during long-range engagements, now slowed him as he scrambled across uneven terrain, every movement threatening to throw off the shot. Each bolt cycle, deliberate and precise, felt like a luxury in the maelstrom surrounding him. Amid the storm of combat, the limits of the L-42A1 became clear. Its design, pushed to the extreme by conversion to a modern cartridge, had performed admirably during careful, calculated engagements, but the frantic, brutal melee of night fighting demanded something more adaptable. Soldiers struggled to balance accuracy, speed, and mobility. Some abandoned the venerable rifle entirely, reaching instead for captured FALs or other weapons that offered rapid fire at the cost of finesse. Yet even in its struggles, the rifle taught invaluable lessons. Commanders observed its strengths and weaknesses under unforgiving conditions, documenting the failures of scope limitations and the burdensome weight. The conversion program had extended a Victorian design into the jet age, but the experience underscored that no matter how refined a platform might be, the battlefield evolves faster than steel alone can follow. These lessons directly accelerated the trials that would eventually lead to the selection of the L-96A1, a rifle designed to meet the demands modern warfare imposed on snipers. By dawn, the roar of battle had subsided, leaving smoke and silence in its wake. The L-42A1 had survived the night, but its era of dominance had passed. In the jagged shadows of Mount Longdon, Fraser understood a truth that extended beyond weaponry. Even the finest legend must evolve, or risk fading into obscurity. The rifle had been a partner, a tool of deadly precision, but the battlefield had moved on, and so too must those who wielded it. The L-42A1 had finally been retired in April of 1992, ending a lineage that stretched back nearly a century to the mind of James Paris Lee. To the casual observer, it might have seemed an old rifle finally set aside, replaced by the sleek, modern L-96A1 from Accuracy International. But anyone who had held it, trained with it, or fired it in anger knew otherwise. This was not merely a story of steel and wood. It was the story of human skill, discipline, and the stubborn endurance of history. Across decades and continents, from the mud of the Somme to the icy cliffs of South Georgia, the L-42A1 had proven that age was no barrier to relevance when paired with mastery. Its successor promised precision, durability, and a rifle purpose-built for modern warfare. The L-96A1 would endure wind, rain, temperature extremes, and the chaos of battle with minimal fuss. But it carried forward lessons only the L-42A1 could impart. That reliability alone is useless without discipline. That advanced optics cannot substitute for intimate knowledge of a weapon's characteristics, and that patience and calculation can be more lethal than volume of fire. Across the Atlantic, the Americans had experimented with the semi-automatic M21, offering rapid engagement at the cost of environmental fragility. The Soviets issued Dragunovs at squad level, a weapon designed to extend suppression rather than guarantee deliberate first-round kills. Both approaches had merit, but they could not replicate what a trained British sniper could achieve with a bolt-action rifle crafted in the age of steam and empire. Post-war analyses of the L-42A1 offered clarity that few anticipated. Failures were rarely mechanical. They were the consequences of time itself. Springs fatigued, scopes aged, stocks warped. Yet even as these physical limitations emerged, skilled operators extracted maximum performance. A soldier who knew the rifle intimately could compensate for small faults, anticipate quirks, and execute precision shots under conditions that would confound modern semi-automatic systems. It was not technology that defined the L-42A1's success. It was doctrine, training, and the subtle interplay between human and machine. Reliability, yes, but paired with patience and expertise, it became lethality incarnate. The rifle story is, in a broader sense, a lesson for institutions as well. Militaries survive and succeed not by chasing novelty blindly, but by refining what already works. Budgets may spiral, procurement may falter, yet the core principle remains. Systems that are understood, practiced, and trusted endure. The L-42A1 exemplified this philosophy. The Ministry of Defense had chosen a conversion program over costly replacement, a pragmatic decision that extended the life of a proven design into the jet age. It was a reminder that ingenuity and careful stewardship can triumph over the allure of the newest, shiniest tool. Collectors now pay thousands for the surviving rifles, a tangible testament to their historical significance. But the true value of the L-42A1 lies not in rarity or price. It lies in the countless moments when skill met opportunity. From South Georgia to Mount Longdon, in wind, fog, and freezing drizzle, the rifle demanded understanding, patience, and precision. Every shot fired was a lesson in restraint, every hit a testament to the bond between soldier and steel. The rifle did not shoot faster than the M21 or cover squads like a Dragunov, but it delivered something both could not, the certainty of a calculated first-round kill. And so, as historians close the final chapter on the L-42A1, its legacy is clear. It represents not merely a weapon but a philosophy, a testament to the idea that mastery endures when systems are respected, studied, and practiced. That human skill can magnify even the oldest designs into something extraordinary. From the trenches of World War I to the windswept heights of the Falklands, the L-42A1 proved that innovation alone does not guarantee success. Understanding, discipline, and perseverance do. From the Somme to the Falklands, through decades of war and evolution, one truth remains immutable. The weapon may age, but mastery never does. The L-42A1 story is a mirror of human ingenuity and endurance, a reminder that even in a world obsessed with speed, firepower, and novelty, the timeless combination of skill, doctrine, and experience will always determine who survives and who triumphs. In the end, history does not remember the rifle for its make or model, but for the hands that wielded it, the minds that understood it, and the battles it quietly, relentlessly won.